What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this video, there are commercial airline pilots flying passengers across the world who are severely depressed, anxious, or experiencing mental health crises that could endanger hundreds of lives, and the entire aviation industry knows about it but can't seem to fix the problem? On March 24th, 2015, 150 people died when Germanwings flight 9525 slammed into the French Alps at over 400 miles per hour. The crash wasn't caused by mechanical failure, terrorism, or bad weather. It was caused by a 27-year-old co-pilot who deliberately locked his captain out of the cockpit and pointed the nose of the aircraft straight into a mountain. But here's what most people don't know. That crash didn't just expose one troubled pilot, it ripped open a systemic failure in aviation mental health that continues to this day, a decade later. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why the very systems designed to keep us safe in the skies might actually be making air travel more dangerous. Let's start by understanding what actually happened on that morning in March. Germanwings Flight 9525 was a routine flight from Barcelona to Dusseldorf, operating as a low-cost carrier owned by Lufthansa. The Airbus A320 had 144 passengers on board, including 16 students and 2 teachers from a German high school returning from an exchange program in Spain. The captain was Patrick Sondenheimer, a 34-year-old father of 2, with thousands of flight hours and an impeccable safety record. His co-pilot was Andreas Lubitz, 27 years old, who had dreamed of flying since childhood and had posters of Airbus and Boeing aircraft covering his bedroom walls as a teenager. After the aircraft reached its cruise altitude of 38,000 feet, Captain Sondenheimer left the cockpit to use the lavatory. This is completely standard procedure on commercial flights. What happened next, however, was anything but standard. Within seconds of the captain leaving, Lubitz manually set the autopilot to descend to 100 feet, which is essentially ground level. He then locked the reinforced cockpit door from the inside using a security feature that had been installed on aircraft worldwide following the September 11th terrorist attacks. The door locking system had been designed to prevent hijackers from storming the cockpit, but now it was being used to lock out the very person who could have prevented the disaster. Began its relentless descent toward the Alps. Air traffic controllers in Marseille noticed something was wrong. The plane was descending rapidly from its cruise altitude without any communication from the flight crew. Controllers tried repeatedly to contact the aircraft on multiple frequencies. No response. They asked other aircraft to try making contact. Still nothing. The cockpit voice recorder later revealed the horrifying truth of what was happening inside that aircraft. Captain Sondenheimer was pounding on the cockpit door, first knocking normally, then banging violently, trying desperately to break through. Passengers could be heard screaming in the background as they realized the plane was going down. The captain even attempted to use an emergency axe to break through the door, but it had been specifically reinforced to withstand such attacks. At 9:41 in the morning, the aircraft slammed into a mountainside in the French Alps at such high speed that it was obliterated into thousands of small pieces scattered across a remote, inaccessible area that could only be reached by helicopter. 150 people were dead, 16 students who had their entire lives ahead of them, teachers, parents, business travelers, vacationers, all gone in an instant because one man in the cockpit had decided that morning would be his last. But here's where the story gets even more disturbing. This wasn't a sudden mental breakdown. This wasn't an impulsive decision made in a moment of crisis. Andreas Lubitz had been planning this for a long time, and multiple people in positions of authority knew he was mentally unfit to fly. Let's go back to the beginning of Lubitz's flying career to understand how someone with such severe mental health issues could end up in control of a commercial airliner. Lubitz joined Lufthansa's prestigious flight training academy straight out of school, fulfilling his childhood dream. But only a few months into the rigorous training program, he abruptly stopped. He had experienced a severe depressive episode that required hospitalization and treatment with powerful antidepressant medications. He spent several months under psychiatric care. Eventually, his psychiatrist declared him to be in remission and cleared him to continue his pilot training. His medical certificate was restored, but it came with a critical condition. If he ever needed psychiatric treatment again, he would be immediately grounded from flying. In 2013, Lubitz achieved his goal and began flying commercial aircraft for Germanwings. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but beneath that surface, things were deteriorating rapidly. In 2014, Lubitz's mental health collapsed again. He began experiencing strange visual disturbances, seeing stars, halos, flashes of light, streaks, and what he described as flying insects in his vision. He became convinced he was going blind and visited ophthalmologists and neurologists multiple times per week, desperately seeking answers. Medical scans found nothing physically wrong with his eyes or brain. His family doctor diagnosed him with hypochondriacal disorder and emergent psychosis. Think about that for a moment. Emergent psychosis. This wasn't just depression or anxiety. This was a complete break with reality, and his doctor urged him to check himself into a psychiatric hospital for intensive treatment. Lubitz refused. He knew that admitting himself to psychiatric care would mean the immediate end of his flying career. Instead, he went back to the psychiatrist who had treated him during his initial breakdown years earlier. He began intensive psychotherapy and was prescribed heavy-duty antidepressant medications. And during all of this, throughout weeks of deteriorating mental health and emergency psychiatric treatment, Andreas Lubitz continued to fly commercial airliners carrying hundreds of passengers. Between February and March of 2015, multiple doctors wrote multiple sick notes declaring him medically unfit to work. He simply didn't give those notes to his employer. He tore them up and went to work anyway. 4 days before the crash, Lubitz sat down at his computer and researched the cockpit door locking mechanisms on the Airbus A320. He wanted to understand exactly how to override the emergency access codes that would allow someone to enter from outside. On his outbound flight from Dusseldorf to Barcelona on the morning of the crash, he practiced. When Captain Sondenheimer briefly left the cockpit, Lubitz experimented with the autopilot descent settings, setting the altitude to 100 feet for just a moment before returning it to normal. The flight data recorder captured this test run. He was rehearsing his suicide. On the return flight just hours later, he executed his plan. Now here's the question that haunted investigators, aviation authorities, and the families of the victims. How did this happen? How did someone who was clearly, demonstrably, documentably, mentally unfit to fly continue to have unrestricted access to commercial aircraft? And more importantly, is this still happening today? The answer to that last question is absolutely yes, and it's getting worse. The fundamental problem is something called the honor system. Commercial pilots are required to undergo regular medical examinations, but mental health screening is far less rigorous than physical health screening. Pilots are essentially expected to self-report if they're experiencing mental health problems. They're supposed to voluntarily disclose if they're seeing a therapist, taking psychiatric medications, or experiencing symptoms of depression, anxiety, or other conditions. But here's the problem. If a pilot discloses mental health treatment, they can be immediately grounded, potentially for months or even years, while they undergo extensive psychiatric evaluation. During that time, they receive no pay. Their career is in limbo. They face potential permanent loss of their medical certificate, which would end their flying career entirely. The tragic irony is that we've created the safest mode of transportation in human history from a mechanical standpoint. Modern aircraft are engineering marvels with redundant systems, sophisticated automation, and safety features that would have been unimaginable decades ago. Fatal accidents caused by mechanical failure are extraordinarily rare, but we've simultaneously created a culture where the human beings operating these machines are afraid to admit when they're struggling, terrified to seek help, and sometimes choose to suffer in silence until they reach a breaking point. And when a pilot reaches that breaking point while in control of an aircraft carrying hundreds of people, the consequences can be catastrophic. Recent investigations confirm that commercial pilots are still hiding mental health struggles. They're still afraid to seek treatment. The stigma hasn't meaningfully decreased. The penalties for disclosure haven't been reduced. The trust in the system hasn't been rebuilt, and that means there are pilots flying today who are depressed, anxious, psychotic, or suicidal, and nobody in authority knows about it, because the pilots know that honesty means the end of their career. Until the aviation industry fundamentally rethinks how it approaches pilot mental health, creating systems that truly encourage help-seeking behavior without career destruction, we will continue to fly with pilots who are suffering in silence. And eventually, inevitably, another one will decide they can't continue anymore. We can only hope they make that decision on the ground rather than in the air.